If she had only been ugly.
Hi, it's Dom Irrera, live from the Laugh Factory, here with my old friend and colleague and peer. Mark Schiff.
Do I have to turn like you did and wave?
You can do whatever. You know, we have cameras all over the place.
All over the place.
Covered.
It's like Macy's. You got cameras everywhere.
I remember the first time I worked with Mark on the road. We worked in Perrysburg, Ohio. He got me a gig, and we're walking down the jetway. It's like 7 o'clock in the morning. I think we had to stop in Pittsburgh first, whatever, and then fly to Toledo. And Mark, all these suits are walking down with their briefcases, and Mark goes, "Chuck! Chuck!" And one guy turns around, and Mark goes, "I knew there was one of them."
There's always a Chuck.
There's always a Chuck.
There's always a Chuck in the...
You know that...
You know what I like to do sometimes? I still do a version of that.
What's
like,
that?
let's say I get off the plane. You know, you walk through the tube to get like out into the
the jetway.
Yeah, jetway. So I'll be behind with like 5 or 6 guys, and we're walking. There'll be a beautiful woman walking in front of us, and I'll go, and then I'll duck. And go, and the guy in the front will always get busted for being the guy.
I have a friend that used to do that. He would like there were these 2 cops walking down this thing called Head House Square in Philadelphia, and it has pillars, so you can hide behind a pillar. And the cops are walking in front of them, and my friend goes, "Hey, pigs! What do you think of my blue sweater?"
Right.
And then he'd hide behind the pole.
Right.
The cops just look, and he's like, "Yeah."
I actually do another one there where I do, and one of the great honors of my life. You remember Louis Nye?
Yeah.
Great Louis Nye.
Hi-ho, Steve Areno.
That's right. Louis Nye was also known, he could bark. He did a tremendous dog. You bark too? Well, I do too. So...
Well, we're just going to have to
we're going to have a bark off. And I was with Louis, and I told him about my barking, and he said, let me hear you bark. And I barked, and he said to me, "I got to tell you, that is a terrific, terrific bark." And it meant so much to me, coming from like the greatest barker of all time.
Dad.
Louis Nye told me I could bark. So anyway, I would go into stores, and I've done this. I've done this to my kids. Like there's a store in our neighborhood, a restaurant, like Subway. You know, in Subway you got to get on that line first before you sit down. So like 6 people, and the owner of that Subway was sitting in the window up front doing some accounting. So he's facing out the window, and I go, and he turns around, and he starts looking, where the hell is this dog? And so he turns back around, starts doing it, I go, so he gets up and starts looking all over the restaurant for the dog. And my kids keep, so anyway, he goes and sits down again.
Your kids are with you?
Yeah, my kids are with me.
They must have loved that.
And he goes and sits down, and one more time I go, and now he's just like searching all over the restaurant and finally cannot find the dog, and just probably checked into a mental home that afternoon.
I did that one night.
How'd you like my bark, by the way?
Huh?
How'd you like my bark?
It's good. It's a little feminine.
Yes, it's high.
It's a little soft.
It's the Seinfeld bark. So it goes up and down, up. So, but let me hear yours.
Okay.
Beautiful. If Louis was here, he would be felling.
Felling.
Yeah.
As the Italians say, it would have been a mitzvah.
Yeah. That's a tremendous... You really... that's like... I do a little pug. But that's like a,
Well, this was the bark that I used in the movie Back at the Barnyard. I probably never told you this story. We're reading the script, and it comes to a point where it says, now we'll use a real dog's bark. And this guy, Steve Odekirk, you know Steve?
I do.
I said, he was directing, and I said, "Steve, you're not for nothing, I got a really good bark." He says, "Let me hear it." I bark. He goes, "There's one dog out of a job." So they fired the dog.
Right.
Fifi didn't come in.
You remember the joke about the guy who had the dog act? And he would, appear, and somebody sees him like one afternoon and says, "Where's the dog?" He goes, "He's working."
It's got a gig.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about practical jokes, we should talk about one of the greatest ones ever with Schaefer.
Steve Schaefer, yeah.
Okay. So you tell me what you remember. I'll tell you what I remember.
Okay.
What I remember is you and I meet at an audition.
Right.
Now, I see you there, you go in and audition, and I forget what it was. Obviously, we probably didn't get it, but I told Schaefer that I saw you there, and you were on the line.
I was on the line.
You were on the line, and I said, I saw Schiff. Oh, he goes, oh, I love Schiff. I love Schiffy. I go, yeah, me too. I said, I got to tell you, Steve, I heard his acting because the walls were kind of thin. And
Right.
I said, what do you think of him as an actor? And he go, well, I love Schiff, but I don't think he's much of an actor.
Right.
And you were on the other line.
I was on the line. It was very painful.
Oh, but you actually got hurt a little, right?
A little bit. A little bit.
It's funny, though, because
but I don't mind, but a little bit. I thought that, but I'm not a great actor. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, but it's not his business. Who is he? Who is he, that fat bastard?
I understand. One time, I'm going to tell you Steve Schaefer's story, since we're talking about it on the phone. Steve calls me up, and he was complaining to me about his agent. He says, the guy never gets me work, and if he does...
Like the guy don't want to get work.
Yeah, right. But, right. That's what we assume, that they don't want to get us work, right?
That's so stupid.
It is, but it seems to be a common...
Because you don't want to blame it on yourself.
But even the work that they get you sometimes, you don't feel they're fighting as hard as they could. That's honest.
Okay.
Sometimes they do. So anyway, Steve told me about his agent. I said, listen, why don't we do this? Let me call him up, and I'll tell him I saw you last night at the comic strip, and I'll tell him I want to hire you, and let's see how he is as an agent.
Right.
Right, it's good.
Yeah.
So Steve says, yeah, okay. And I say, I'll make a three-way call. You just keep your mouth shut and listen to this. So it was with ICM. I don't remember the agent's name, so I call up, and he gets on the phone. I said, yeah, hi, my name is Jack Smith, whatever it was, and I work with a company, and last night we were at the comic strip. We saw this guy, Steve Schaffer. He goes, yeah, Steve Schaffer. I go, you handle him? Yes, I do. Well, we want to book him for our, office party. So he goes, well, how much have you got? Right to the thing. So I said, we have $5,000. So he said, if you want to make a deal right now, I can get you him for $1,500. Schaaf almost jumped through the phone with his hand and started choking the guy. I said, really? Even though I paid $5,000, he goes, $1,500, we'll make the deal right now.
That's hilarious.
And we hung up. I said, I'll call you back and let me talk to my people. I hung up. And Schaaf goes, I can't believe it. I can't.
That's great.
It was truly one of the worst moments of his life.
Well, he's a terrible gambler. And he's very funny. He'll bet on. Like one day he calls me up. He goes, "You want to bet on the Eagles game today?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I'll take the Eagles." I go, "I want the Eagles." He goes, "All right, I'll take the Redskins."
Right.
That's
it. No.
And he bet he wants to shoot pool, and he wants to play for money. Now I'm much better than him, so I'm not going to play my friend for money.
Sure.
So he's over at my house with my friend Mitch Gilbert. This is out here. And I says, I'll tell you what, we won't bet for money, but we'll bet whoever loses has to call Lucian at the comic strip and talk about baseball for a half an hour when they're done.
Right.
Right?
What a torture that would have been.
Marco was so funny. We were crying, laughing. Me and Mitch were on the other line. And Schaaf calls up and he goes, hey, Lucian. Well, hello, Steve.
Right.
And what did you think of the game tonight? He goes, there was no game tonight. He says, "Oh, I know there wasn't any game, but I was wondering what you thought of it. Like in general."
Sure.
It's like just stumbling. This is
Sure.
out of the box.
Sure.
Can you imagine 25 more minutes of that?
Oh yeah.
Or howling.
Lucian was a good guy, and he's not with us anymore.
Yeah.
They all go except us.
He was the guy that passed me. Well, I mean, he didn't pass me. Larry Miller and Dennis Wolfberg passed me at the comic strip. But Lucian was the guy that we went to for the get the spots. Remember?
Yes.
This is the comic strip in New York. It's 81st and 2nd Avenue. Mark used to work, Mark and I worked there, but when I started, Mark was already established, and I remember seeing you one night. You were great, and it was you and Seinfeld and Brogan and Larry Miller. That's a great show.
It's a great show.
And I remember telling Larry Miller one time, I go, what's it like being in A act?
Yeah.
Like, he says, you'll find out someday. I go, oh, thanks.
I was a cook at the comic strip.
Were you a cook?
I was a cook there on Monday nights.
Oh, really?
And
that was before I came.
Yeah, it was on Monday nights, and John, one of the owners, what the heck?
John McGowan.
John McGowan, Irish drunken owner, nice man. And I used to have I would open up the place and go in there, and then I would invite like 10 comics in. I got in there around 5, and I would just make dinner for everybody. On the comic strip's dime.
Oh, that's funny.
And it was really...
I never knew you cooked there. I worked the coat room, and then I worked the phones. And I almost got in a fist fight with Lucian once about coming in. I was having anxiety and stuff, and he said, if you don't come in today, you're not going to be able to get on stage. I said, you're going to hold that against me? And he did, you know. But anyway, you know, we were fine at the end. But one time I lost a coat. You know, he goes, how could you lose a coat? I go, I don't know. He said, well, it was a fur coat.
Right.
And he said something like it was $57, right? And I remember saying, what the hell kind of fur is $57? Rat fur?
Yeah, right.
You know? And,
Right.
then I got fired from
Weasel
there.
fur.
Remember, like I was in the coat room, and I would tell Richie that I was better than a lot of the guys. And hey, I'm
Right.
in the coat room, right? Like I had to get a good
Right.
foot to stand on. Hey, Dom, could you put my coat on? I told
Right.
you that guy Richie Gold.
Richie Gold, I remember.
He was so rude to me. Like he didn't even acknowledge me. He just put his arms out, so I'm supposed to put his coat on.
Right.
You know.
David Brenner used to come in with a mink stole.
Who?
David Brenner used to come in to
Oh,
catch
did
a
he
rising
really?
star. He wore a full-length mink coat. And I once brought it up to him. I said, you know, I remember you coming to catch with this mink coat on. And he goes, that coat was so popular. I mean, people just, they forgot his act, but they never forgot the coat.
Yeah. I seem to remember that coat. I remember
It was when we were all kind of struggling to make money. He walked in with this $50,000 coat. It was quite remarkable.
Brenner was one of those guys. When he came in, it was a big deal.
Big deal.
You know.
Rodney came in. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
When
Rodney was hilarious, and we talked about him several times on the show. The idea that he would come in with his robe and slippers and do stand-up.
Right.
Talk about a guy who's comfortable on stage, huh?
I went to see him a couple of days before he died.
Yeah.
His wife called me up and said, go to the hospital and say goodbye to him, and I did. One night, Middleman and I walked into a fish restaurant called Jaime's, which used to be on Pico, and we walk in to get some dinner, and Rodney is sitting at the bar by himself. And we go, I said to Steve, there's Rodney. So I go over, I say, hey, Rodney. He goes, hey, how you doing, Mark? I go, okay. He goes, how you doing? So he knew us. He says, what are you guys doing here? So he said, we're going to have dinner. So he said to us, he goes, do you mind if I join you?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was nice. It's kind of lonesome. You know, Rodney just sitting by himself at this restaurant, drinking at the
Yeah.
bar. So he sits down with us and he goes, boys, anything you want on me. So we order, you know, Steve orders, I order. And Rodney orders this. They know him there now. They bring out a pot, like a soup pot, with like a soup, like a stew, with clams and oysters. And he picks up this bowl and just starts drinking out of this giant thing. And he would eat like a clam, and it has a shell, and then he'd throw it back in the water. So anyway, at the end of the meal, he gives the guy the credit card, and the guy leaves and goes to run. He comes back and goes, this card's no good. And Rodney looks, it was a card that, like from 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
This card didn't exist for the last 15
You
years.
guys didn't have to pay, did you?
No. And they let him go, and then they said he'll pay some other time. But it was just a great
That's funny.
time with him.
Yeah, I went and said goodbye to him, too. That was weird. All that acclaim, and I see sitting there in a coma. I'm telling him I love him, and just a strange...
Yes. Were you at the funeral?
Yeah, I did the eulogy.
That's
I was
right.
One of the
There
guys
you
that
go.
did
I
the
remember.
eulogy.
Yeah, it was probably some of the most fun I ever had. You know what it says on his tombstone, by the way?
Yeah, tell me, though.
He's buried in Westwood, behind where the old AFCO Theater is in Westwood, where Marilyn Monroe is in the same...
Right.
It says, there goes the neighborhood on his tombstone.
That's great.
And he's buried right next to, I think, one or two tombs away from Eric Douglas, Kirk Douglas's son.
Yeah, I remember Eric.
Who tried his hand at stand-up. Do you know the Eric Douglas story when he appeared?
I know a lot of Eric Douglas stories.
You know the one when he appeared in England, and he was on stage and he didn't do very well, and he says to the audience, "Well, I'm Eric Douglas," and somebody stands up and goes, "I'm Eric Douglas," and somebody else stands up, "I'm Eric Douglas," and the whole crowd got up.
Did he get upset?
Very upset, I heard.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I remember one night at the Comedy Store. We're talking about Eric Douglas, Kirk Douglas's youngest son.
He was a nice guy. I knew him very well.
He was starting to wig out a little.
Yeah.
And he was on stage, and he starts saying nigger this and nigger that, and I'm going, oh my God. And this black kid comes up on stage and he goes, listen, man, you don't have to use that word. You know, you can he can be a little bit, it's offensive. And he wasn't aggressive at all and nice about it. He shouldn't have come on stage, but he should have got the security. But anyway, that's not the point. Point is, they waited for him. He had a little dog. The 2 black kids waited for him, and you could see it outside. Everybody starts forming around. And they didn't want to hit him because they knew they were smart enough to know they could get a lawsuit, so they punched the dog.
Wow.
Yeah. They punched the dog. And then these guys, this tall, blonde-haired guy, and Freddie Soto? Remember Freddie
sure,
died
I do, of course.
a few years
Yeah,
ago?
he was a big, heavy guy.
Yeah.
Well, he worked at the Comedy Store.
No, you're thinking of Freddie Asparagus.
Asparagus.
Thinking of a different Latino guy.
You're right, okay.
But Freddie was, pretty big, but my size kind of, don't say anything.
Okay.
Don't say anything.
I won't.
It's my show. Be nice.
Okay, I will.
I know what you're thinking.
I know you are.
You were like this once.
I wasn't going to say anything.
You were like this at one time?
I walked in your shoes.
Now they're all stretched out.
Yeah.
But he starts, they're there to protect him. And Eric was wigging out. He goes, and fuck you, you fucking spick, he says to Freddie. And then he calls the other guy a Nazi, just because the guy was a tall, blonde-haired guy.
Right.
And you Nazi man. And as they say that, both of them hit him.
Right.
His simultaneous punch, beautiful punch. He has so much cocaine in his system, he went down and he woke up immediately. Like Beetlejuice.
Right.
That's why I only do one show a night.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he drove home. I'll never forget this because the cops knew him. And he just scraped a bunch of cars, and they didn't stop him. They let him go.
Wow.
Yeah. A tragic thing, though, but...
A lot of our friends didn't fare out too well. A bunch of them.
Well, Ronnie Shakes he wasn't a friend because I wasn't around long enough to know him. But
He's a great guy.
I love that line about, what was the line about the therapist?
I was talking to my therapist for years. I was talking to this therapist, and one day he said something that brought tears to my eyes. No habla inglés.
Yeah, right.
I just bumped into his wife, ex-wife at the time, Sue.
Sue, yeah, I remember.
I saw her at the airport 3 days ago. I hadn't seen her in 15 years. It's funny you brought her up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Comedians seem to die young or live to 80
Yeah.
or 90. I knew that whole group of comedians. Like, I knew Sid Caesar really well. You knew him, didn't you?
A little bit. Not
Yeah.
really well.
Well, you know what it is? I did a lot of roasts with him.
Right. I didn't do any.
And he always closed a lot.
Was he good?
He was great. He did that gibberish thing.
Yeah,
it
I
was
know.
beautiful,
Yeah.
I did a tribute to him because he was getting older and they didn't want to roast him again. So they just wanted to do a tribute, and
Sure.
it was nice. Everybody loved him.
Right.
Hey, what a
I was at his funeral the other day.
Yeah, I know. I wish I had known.
Yeah. Norman Lear was there, and Richard Lewis was there, and Billy Crystal was there, and Mel Brooks. It was really quite the event.
Yeah, Richard Lewis is funny, man. You know how you talk about Paul Bustin. Like I always can get to Richard. I'm going to San Francisco, and I see him at Burbank Airport, and as soon as they open the doors, he crouches down and runs on the plane like a crazy man. Right? I said to Richard, "Wow, what you got in your eye? Is that like a blood blister?"
Yeah, wow.
And he goes,
That gets him crazy.
He goes, yeah. I said, you could see it. I said, everybody in the airport were talking about it. Really? Yeah. I've done this. So I said, you look a little green. You all right? And, anyway, so we get to the, how he is. He's, like heck, he idles high. He's a very nervous guy. And we're going into town. Now, he has a limo picking him up, and I'm going to take a cab.
Right.
Now, anybody else would go, ride with me in the limo to my hotel, then take a cab from there. He just goes and leaves me.
Right, wow.
So I do it on the radio about how he left me high and dry, and we had this running fun feud. Not real. But I go, how could you do that? He says, well, I had stuff to do. I said, what, you got dry cleaning there? You haven't been there for a year? But
he's a good guy. He's a funny guy, and
very
always
funny.
very kind.
Yeah.
And I saw him last year at the Improv in Brea, maybe a year and a half ago. I drove out there to see a set. Enormous. He has a great line about working down south, and he knew he was in the wrong place because he got off the plane, and they had a sheet vending machine.
That's funny.
A great line. He's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the. He was already a big act too when I started. So I never saw those guys struggle. Like you were always good. I mean, I never saw you not good.
I wasn't for a long time. In fact, one night
I heard you told me that.
That was awful. Belzer was on Bob Costas when he had Later with Bob Costas. Do you remember this talk show?
Yeah.
It wasn't a sports show. It was just
Right.
interview like Pierce Morgan or one of these guys. So anyway, one night Costas says to him, who's the worst comedian you've ever seen in your life? And Belzer, said, nah, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to. And Bob said, come on, just tell. It's a stupid question. So Belzer goes, let me think. He goes, well, there were two guys that when they started out, they were unwatchable. Steve Middleman and Mark Schiff.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but then he says, but they've gotten really good now, and they're really funny now. But when these guys started out, you couldn't. I remember one night I went to a place called the Triple Inn.
I remember that.
West 54th Street, right across from where Studio 54 was.
Right.
And
wasn't it called Ye Old Triple Inn?
Ye Old Triple Inn. And it was a policeman hangout, actually. What it was a police station also on the block.
That's where the police used to drink?
The police used to drink in there. And right across the street is more cocaine than in Bolivia.
Yeah.
At Studio 54, and the cops are across the street. Let me have another one. So I get off stage one night, and I said to Kenny, who owned the Ye Old Triple Inn, I said, so what do you think? And I didn't do well. I was new. He said, well, to tell you the truth, your material is shit, and you have no personality.
Other than that.
So, but being who we are, I just kept coming back and back until one night. I'm going to tell you a story. Do you mind? If I tell you a little story here?
Well, no.
You got nothing to do, right?
Podcast.
Yeah. Gilbert Gottfried was on stage, and you remember he used to do a thing about people dying in his arms?
No.
Kennedy died in my arms.
No, I don't
he would transport himself to some place and say he was there holding the person. So he goes, he says to the audience, now Sal Mineo, remember the great actor, young kid Sal Mineo? He was murdered, and he was stabbed to death in a West Hollywood parking lot.
Uh-huh.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Gilbert is on stage and he says, I feel bad or something, whatever the bit is. He goes, Sal Mineo died in my arms. I was with him and I was holding him, and he was bleeding all over me. And I said, Sal, and he does, and all of a sudden in the audience he hears, stop him! Stop him! Shut him up! Shut him up! Sal Mineo's sister was in the audience.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and he didn't know that, and they had to restrain the woman because she wanted to kill him. And Gilbert says, what's going on? And they go, Sal Mineo's sister. And he runs out the side door because she was going to just choke him to death. Funny. And I was there. It was quite the moment.
Was that true, the story about Linda McCartney, that she was in the audience at Catch?
I heard that when they said...
What kind of pig...
Yeah, kind of pig. The punchline was Linda McCartney.
What pig...
lies with...
as in, what pig has wings and doesn't fly? Linda McCartney. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was true. Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that. I do remember... I was there when they broke Joe Piscopo's nose.
The mob guys, right?
Yeah, I was there. Joe's on stage, and Joe would talk to the audience. He'd do some talking to. I hear he has a show, a radio show now.
Well, I don't know.
But anyways, he talks to the audience. Where you from? Where you from? And there's a table at Catch a Rising Star in the back, not far back, like 20 feet, and a bunch of guys. And he says, "Where you guys from?" And they don't answer. And he goes, "Where you guys from?" And they don't answer. He goes, "Hitmen for the mob?"
Oh boy!
He just throws that out, and they don't say anything. So he gets off stage, and they go into, and he's in the outside, and these guys come out and grab him, take him into the coat room, and start punching him in the face, and his nose is just bent and bleeding.
Wow!
So I took him to the hospital with John DeBellis. Remember John?
Mm-hmm.
We take him to the hospital, and they bandage his face up and try to reset his nose. His nose is broken. They give him I shoot him up with dope, painkiller, and they tell him to go home. And he says, and he's like drunk now, like high from all these painkillers, and he wants to go back to Catch now.
Not to get the guys,
just to go back.
Oh boy!
So I say, "You want to go home?" So we go back there. I go back with him, and the guys are still there. which tells you something about the joint we were working.
Yeah,
Because what
they didn't even
place
throw them out.
didn't throw them out? How many places do you go to where you break somebody's nose that works there and you go, have dessert?
Where are you going?
Yeah. Where you going
It's
in such a
early.
rush? It's early. Have another drink on me. One of those mobsters grabbed me one night, and supposedly he had a history of murdering people, and he threw me up front against a cigarette machine. Remember cigarette machines?
Yeah.
Remember those machines?
Of course.
You're that age. You remember cigarette when you pulled the thing? He throws me against the machine. And he says, "Tell me a joke, and if I don't laugh, I'm going to kill you." This is what he said.
It's reasonable.
A joke comes to mind. I said I was in Poland, and I went. You know, how come every show you go to in Poland and you go to watch a show, you can't see anything? And the guy goes, "I don't know why." I said, "Because everywhere you sit, you're sitting behind a pole." And he actually laughed at that joke. He laughed, and he said, "All right, I'm going to let you go. That's funny." That was the joke I told him.
That's hilarious. I had
Always have a Polish joke on hand.
you know, I had two cops stop me in Avalon, New Jersey, and I didn't know they recognized me because you know me, I didn't drink most of my career, so I had like a beer, so I knew that I was fine, and they had me doing this and all.
Right.
Then they say, sing, you know, do the alphabet backwards. I go, I can't even do it forward unless I sing it. And then they go, well, tell us a joke. I says, you know, they recognize me.
Yeah.
So the joke I told them was a black guy and a Puerto Rican are in a car. Who's driving? The police.
Right. Good joke.
Remember that? Yeah.
Right. I love the how small is it? You know, I live in an apartment that's so small. I had to go out in the hall to change my mind.
Right.
I lived in an apartment so small I can only fry one egg at a time. I love those jokes.
Jackie Martling was great at them, and he was also great at the stories.
He has some great jokes. He has a thing that, you know, I get an email from him every month.
He's unbelievable. What a marketeer he is.
There's always like 75 new jokes.
Remember when we started out, and every time we stopped at a toll booth, there'd be a Jackie the Joke Man thing stuck
That's
to
so
it.
funny. Yeah, he was a nice guy. I met him. We spent some time a couple of years ago.
So, Mark, what made you straighten up so much, clean up? Like
Clean up my life.
Well, when I first knew Mark, I mean, you drink. I remember you always had like Chablis or something. You used to drink white wine. You smoked, right?
Smoked a couple packs a day, 3 packs a day, 2 packs a day.
And you were not very religious.
Not religious, and I drank like a fish, and I ate bad food, and I didn't exercise, and I chased women all night. It was the life. It really was.
It was great.
It was
you miss
unbelievable.
it?
Yeah,
Miss it?
every second. Well, you know that joke about the guy goes to the doctor. The doctor said, "What can I do for you?" He goes, "You know, I want to live to 95." And the doctor says, "Well, do you smoke?" And the guy goes, "No." He goes, "Do you drink?" "No." "Do you take drugs?" "No." "Do you chase women around?" "No." "Do you play golf?" "No." The doctor goes, "Why do you want to live to 95?"
You have a boring life.
Yeah. But yes, I did all those things, and I did it with gusto.
Because I never talked to you about the change. You know,
Yeah.
like we haven't seen each other that much over the last few years, and occasionally in the clubs, and you know, you changed so much. I mean,
Yeah.
you're still funny as hell, but I just wonder, did anything happen in your life? Did somebody pass away? Did something happen that you?
I just knew I was heading for the end.
The eve of destruction?
Yeah, I was finished. My blood pressure was really high from the smoking and the drinking, you know, and the bad diet, and I was feeling bad. All my relationships were hitting the rocks. Any girl I dated, it just ended miserably.
Yeah.
And
Did you ever sleep with Siskin?
Carol Siskin. No, I never made it to the C's. I only made A and B.
In alphabetical order?
Yeah.
Never Rita Rudner?
Never Rita Rudner. Carol Siskin was a nice. We used to play poker together. In fact,
Yeah.
Abby Stein, who's not well now. You know, she's very sick.
Really?
Yeah.
I loved Abby Stein.
I
Abby
did-
Stein's got one of the greatest Holocaust stories of. Did you ever hear it?
No.
It's a very typical story, but she goes and does this thing for these some Jewish organization, and they start not just talking about the Holocaust, but wailing and davening and wailing, and you know all. And the rabbi picked her up, and she was crying because she had done so poorly. She totally bombed, and she said, "Is it always this bad?" She goes, and then the rabbi goes, "Oh yeah, it's been worse." But, you know, I said, she said, "Why do you even do it?" He goes, "It makes them feel a little better." But it was basically the Abby Stein.
Sure.
Because I know what the punchline was, and this is what, and she did it in her act or did it as a story. They're doing all this crying about all those horrible atrocities, and now the comedy of Abby Stein.
Right.
You know, and so she had to go on. And if you
Well, keep her in your prayers. She's sick, but hopefully she'll get
sorry to
better.
hear that.
Hopefully she'll get better. But we used to play poker at her house.
Uh-huh.
And Abby was a real... like
Beautiful skin and big breast.
Exactly. You know. But we used to play poker. We'd start poker games at 4 in the morning. We'd get pizza at some of the New York spots and go to her house, and we played from 4 to 8 in the morning. It was fantastic. And Middleman would play, and one night Gabe Kaplan came up and played.
I heard he was a big poker player.
Big poker player. And Buddy Mantilla played, and DeBellis played, and Bram Van Hoffman played.
I like Brant. You know, but DeBellis was the inspiration for me to pursue stand-up comedy.
Really?
Yeah, because honest to God, and not to put John down, because he was. I knew him well, not that well. I knew him a little from Saturday Night Live, and I knew he was a very good writer. But when I saw him on stage at Catch, frankly, he was so bad that I thought, I can't be any worse than that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that inspired me.
Right.
It was like a joke. My mother said she didn't realize she was writing a joke, and I love David Brenner. But her and my Aunt Phil went to see David Brenner at Columbo's, this club in Philly.
Yeah.
And she goes, we saw David Brenner. We didn't laugh the whole 45 minutes. We loved to laugh. He sucked.
Yeah.
And then he goes, my mom goes, you're just as good as he is.
And you got impetus to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think David...
John wrote a book called
David's
Stand Up Guys.
terrific.
I don't know if you read the book Stand Up Guys.
Who wrote it?
John DeBellis.
Oh, did he?
Wrote a book called Stand Up Guys, and the opening story in the book was about Larry David went to visit somebody. I can't remember who he went to visit. And the guy said to him, how's DeBellis doing? I haven't seen John in a while. And Larry goes, you haven't heard? He goes, no, what is it? He goes, John is terminal. He's got cancer and he's not going to live. And Larry stuck with the story. And John started getting all these phone calls from people.
That's horrible.
And he was really okay. And he would get phone
What a
calls. I'm sorry,
horrible story.
John, I heard you were going to die.
God.
And actually, John, because Larry did it, he was able to laugh at it. But everybody thought he was...
Wow, that's kind of over the top. You know...
That's the first story in this book.
Is it really?
Yeah.
We were talking about Seinfeld because we both go way back with Seinfeld, and I know that you work with Jerry a lot.
Yeah.
And he, it's so interesting to think of with him and Larry what they accomplished. To me, it was the greatest. To me, it was the best TV show ever. But
yeah,
maybe I'm prejudiced, maybe because I love the guys and all that. But I just think it's brilliant. But we had mentioned McCartney and Lennon.
Right.
When we mentioned McCartney, we mentioned John Lennon, but they were like, like McCartney would write, "It's getting better all the time," and Lennon would say, "It couldn't get much worse."
Right.
Well, that's what Larry and Jerry were like, in a sense.
Right. That's right.
Whereas Jerry was that brilliant observationalist, and Larry was the one who would write an episode that the glue from the envelopes kills
George's girlfriend.
Right.
I was with Jerry the other day. One of the things we do on the tour is we go to the movie. On our, the next day, we do a show, and then the next afternoon, before the night show, we go to a movie. And Jerry usually rents out the theater. So it's just me and him and Kevin Doctorman, the producer. So
sounds like a fun time.
It's great. We take over a whole theater, and we go in at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they got popcorn and everything ready for us. So we went to see Philomena the other day. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I know about it, though.
Okay, so it's Judi Dench.
It's about the nuns and stealing the babies.
Yeah. So Judi Dench, who looks about 85 in the movie, she's all wrinkled up and she looks old. And then there's a guy in there who's about, 55. He's playing opposite her. So Jerry says to me, we're sitting in the theater, and he says, people tell me, he goes, do you think I look like him? And the actor's up on the screen. So I said, and I'm looking, and then all of a sudden the camera in the movie switches to Judi Dench, and I go, you look more like her. And it got such a big laugh for the three of us. He couldn't believe I said it. He just couldn't stop laughing.
Right.
And it came out so funny, and there was a big shot of her on the screen when I said it at just the right time. Oh, Jerry, I really think you really look more like her. And her face is up to like...
One of the things I always liked about Seinfeld was, as great a comedian as he is, and I think in his genre he's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
He always laughed at comedians.
Very
He loves
good.
he really sincerely
Very
laughs.
good laugher. I wish I had some of those qualities.
Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really got a great sense of humor about it, you know?
Yeah. He has a thing, if you can live by this code, you can act, one of the reasons he's great at what he does, it's very simple. Plan your work. No, it's plan your work, plan the work, work the plan. Plan the work the plan. So he plans what he's going to do for the day, and then he works that plan.
Well, you know what he told me a long time ago, and which I still haven't adhered to. I have a time. He says, "I do. You just think of it as 25 minutes a day." He said, "I'll just sit there. If nothing comes, it doesn't come. But I'll at least sit there for 25 minutes."
That's right. Showing
try
up.
and write.
Showing up.
But it's so interesting how we're all wired differently. One time, just to show you how long ago it was, we were taking People Express back from Newark.
$19,
Well, we bumped up. We got $50 each and bumped up to first class.
which was $29. Remember People Express.
So this is the difference between me and Jerry. I mean, and like Jerry's got that inner peace or whatever it is that, like philosophical calm. It gets turbulence, right? And I'm like, fuck, oh man.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there. I go, doesn't this bother you? He goes, of course it bothers me, but there's nothing you can do. And I'm thinking,
Right.
but don't you feel,
Right.
like interesting how different people are.
I had a flight thing with him one night. It's a great story. But by the way, about remember PSA Airlines? There was an airline called PSA.
Pacific something?
Yeah, I mean,
Pacific
it's funny to have
Southwest?
an airline named the same thing as a rectal exam. PSA Airlines. But one night, we're in Minnesota. Midnight, we finished the second show, and we go to the jet port, to take Jerry, we got that private jet thing. And we get on the plane, and it's snowing out, and the runway is a bit icy. And the pilot gives a little spiel. He goes, okay, guys, blah, blah. And on these private jets, what happens is there's three of us. So Jerry and I are sitting, and we're facing, Kevin and Jerry are sitting facing the pilot up front, and he can, see the pilot. And I'm sitting facing them. So the pilot starts taking off, and the plane's going down the runway, and all of a sudden I see Kevin's face change, and all of a sudden the plane, he throws it into...
Brakes?
To stop it. And we start skidding all over the runway and spinning and all this stuff. It was really something. Because he was almost up to 100-something miles an hour, and he just pulled out at the last minute. So anyway, 10 minutes later, the pilot comes back, and he says, okay, this is the deal, guys. All the red lights went on in the dashboard as I was taking off, and Kevin said, I saw that. That's why his face changed. So the pilot says, this is the deal. I personally think it's a malfunction, and I don't think we have an engine problem, but the engine lights did go on. So I'm going to leave it up to you if you want to take off.
I don't want it to be left up to me.
Listen to this, right? So the pilot looks at Jerry and says, what do you think? So Jerry goes, let's go for it. And Kevin, they look at Kevin, he goes, what do you think? And he goes, I'm in. And then they look at the shivering Jew, I'm like, and I said, they go, what do you think? And I go, yeah, I don't know, it's just... And Jerry goes, well, I'll give you an option. You can get off now, and then you can get an early flight. We'll make sure you get, if you want to meet us, but we're going to go now. And he says, no peer pressure. But, so I said, okay, I'll go. And I almost could feel my bowels coming through my pants.
Right.
So the pilot goes, okay, we're gonna give it a shot. So now I'm bone dry in my mouth. So, when you get nervous, you start asking questions. I said to Jerry, Jerry, how long is this flight? And he goes, after we take off, it shouldn't be more than 2-3 minutes. Which made me laugh and made Kevin laugh. And then we took off into the storm, and the plane took some big but it was just turbulence. The plane was fine. But that was truly one of the scariest experiences of flying
he's
I've
got
had.
a calm that's incredible. It's funny, Rodney had a line in that genre. When he was going to the hospital, I went over to see him at his apartment, and he said, his line was, well, if everything goes right, I'll be out in about 2 weeks. If it goes wrong, I'll be out in about a half hour.
Same thing, right.
Yeah.
One night, I was flying to Europe one time. I flew to Europe, and I got the emergency door exit seat, And you know, they give you the spiel when you sit at the emergency room.
Yeah.
Are you willing to, in case of emergency?
I'm capable, but I'm not willing.
Yeah, I understand. But you got to nod your head because you want the room. So I always say to them, I'm your guy. Don't worry.
I'll take care of you.
So we're flying to Europe, and we're flying from JFK over to England. Maybe about 2 or 3 hours into the flight attendant comes over to me and says, I need to talk to you.
Oh, jeez.
I said, what's the matter? She goes, we're having a problem. You might have to open the door. We're over the ocean now.
Oh, my God.
I said, what? She says, I'm not sure, but I just want to come tell you. And it may not happen, and probably won't, but be aware. 5 more hours of flying. I'm the most nervous. I'm ready to vomit.
Is this a joke?
No, dead serious. There was a malfunction with something, and he didn't know if he would have to make a water landing.
My God, a water landing.
Or a landing in Iceland, wherever the next possible place was. And I was called upon to open the door, and I was like sweating, freezing cold. I mean, I'd never been like this in my life.
Oh, that's terrifying.
And I would say to her, like every few minutes, how's it going? We don't know yet.
I had a flight. By coincidence, I knew the flight attendant. Right, she was living, just by major coincidence, living next door to the friends I was staying in Florida. And she goes, you want to sit with me? I just got to get out of the jumpsuit, seat, and I'll come and sit right next.
Jumpsuit is Elvis.
Yeah, right. Okay. I got to get out of my jumpsuit.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You got to finish some potatoes?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I'll come back. And it was kind of an empty plane. And we're going up. And you know how you go to a doctor and you want them to go, no, I see this all the time. You don't want a doctor to go, oh, no, And we're going up. And then we start going down. Like we immediately go up and start going down. And she goes, I said, is this normal? She goes, no. And she starts to panic.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, I'm the calm guy.
Right.
And we land, and we have to jump down those chutes, the slides. And then I was in good shape. It didn't matter. But a lot of people were like really struggling and screaming and stuff. It was an Arab-Israeli. It was during one of the Arab-Israeli conflicts, and it was a bomb threat.
Yeah. Wow.
But man, it was weird to actually see that happen because we both flown millions of miles. I'm sure you have by now.
Yes. I was on a flight. Maybe about 15 years ago, I was flying into Lexington, Kentucky, and the pilot, we're going to go in, and I see he's about to land, and he goes back up. We've all had that flying up, just whatever. He goes back up, and we're sitting there, and a lot of times they don't announce anything.
Right.
They just, you're quiet. And he keeps flying like over farmland, like really low. He keeps flying like in circles. Finally, we hear an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the pilot, and we have a situation, he goes, and I'm not sure if we can land, normally.
Safely?
Yeah, he says, we have a problem, and we have, the tires, he didn't know if he could get them down, the wheels. He says, if we can't get them down, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come in pretty hard, and I just want to tell you to be ready in, position, whatever. Mm-hmm. So, we're flying low, so I have a cell phone, and I turn it on, and I'm low enough to actually get some bars. So I call my wife, and she's taking the kids to school. It's in the morning. I go, hey, Nance, listen, I'm on the plane, and the pilot says, this is his words, we got a situation, and we may not be able to make it, and I just want to say I love you, and, in case anything happens.
Wow. So
we start coming in, and we see waiting for the plane are guys in those aluminum suits with hoses.
Right.
It looks like something out of and they're all dressed, and they're standing with the hoses in case we... Anyway, the wheels came down, and we landed safely, but nobody on the plane. And by the way, everybody was panicked except one woman sitting next to me kept reading this cooking magazine and never looked up. Nothing seemed to bother her. She was reading recipes. It was the most...
That's great.
I'm looking, I want to go, what is wrong with you? We're about to die, and you're reading how to make a meatloaf?
That's funny. Yeah, well, you figure we do so much flying, something is bound to happen.
But nothing's ever really happened to any of the comedians. I had a theory. Rock stars go down on planes. Comedians, since Will Rogers was the last comedian to go down. Otherwise, we don't go down on planes. God doesn't want us like that. He wants, some reason God wants music right away, so he takes the rock singers, or real quick, but not us.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting how long comedians live, the ones that actually make it through a certain age.
Yeah.
You know?
I was at Sid Caesar's funeral. There were so many guys in their late 80s, early 90s.
Isn't that incredible?
Incredible.
Yeah, I believe that something about the catharsis of doing comedy that keeps you alive, and the mental acuity
Right.
of it, don't you think? Like,
Absolutely. And what we do is we're lucky because we're not actors and we're not dancers.
oh,
or
I'm
singers.
an actor. You're not.
You are. But we don't have to depend on other people to do what we do.
That's not great.
So I can get up on any given night somewhere, even if I'm not getting paid, and use my talent.
Yeah.
If I'm a singer, I can't go, where am I going to get a 14-piece band tonight?
Well, yeah.
Or if I'm a dancer.
Well, especially if you're an actor or a dancer. At least a singer can go sing karaoke. But an actor, you can't just start a play. You guys want to get together and do a couple scenes from on the waterfront?
But we can get up and do our thing and then feel like, we're still creative.
No, it's great. I mean,
And we never have to take a year off like these actors.
yeah, in between movies.
How do they do it?
Yeah.
How about Alec Baldwin snapping?
What happened?
You haven't read about this?
No, not the one on the plane.
No, this new thing here. He just wrote this big manifesto and blaming everybody for everything. He quit show business and he's...
Alec Baldwin quit?
Yeah.
Wasn't he the one that was going to go to Paris, to France, if George Bush got elected?
Bush, yeah, he's done that a couple of times. But this is a pretty serious break from reality, this one.
It's kind of crazy, huh?
He wrote shoe bomber manifestos. Like, not threatening to kill anybody, but pointing a finger at every person alive.
Well, I saw him on Jerry's thing about coffee and...
Seemed very normal, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a good actor.
Very good actor, yeah.
Yeah, good actors can act normal.
Yeah. So what's the conclusion on it? It's not done yet?
Him?
No, I mean, did he retire? Did he...
As far as he's concerned, he's threatened to do that before. He's had so many breaks from reality, calling people names and threatening people, and, it's a shame.
I've met his brothers.
Steve Baldwin or
Billy
Baldwin.
Was he? I think he's a friend of Pauly Shore's.
Yeah.
I think I met him at the Comedy Store.
I saw Pauly on a plane last year, and he wouldn't talk to me.
Really?
Yeah. I said, Pauly, how are you? Mark Schiff. He goes, yeah. I said, well, yeah, Mark Schiff. He goes, yeah. And then that was pretty much the end of the conversation.
It's good. It's good to see him, huh?
Yeah. I try to say hello to people when I see them.
Yeah, it's nice. Well, it's called courtesy.
Yeah,
courtesy.
but other comedians, you go, how are you doing? Hey, yeah. All right. You know what, tell me?
You know who was the funniest one for me? Like, the biggest attitude was Paul Anka. I mean, he never mistreated me. I worked with him, and he acted like it was a thrill to meet him for me. And I was like laughing, thinking, I'm not even a fan.
Right.
I respect what you've done.
Right.
But, he goes like this, how you doing? And I thought he was going to call me slugger and rub my hair.
Right.
Hey there, slugger.
What's the worst act? You don't have to name it, but what's the worst act you ever worked with? Do you remember anybody that really was?
Sherman Hemsley.
Sherman Hemsley.
And a great guy. But I mean,
he tried his hand at what we do?
Yeah, a little bit. And there were two. I mean, Pia Zadora was not the strongest. The most talented person I ever worked with, I would say, probably was Natalie Cole. Just on pure fucking talent.
I worked with her too. I did a night.
Great, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And Shara is terrific, but she's a different kind of talent. She's more multi-talented in different parts of the show business. But Sherman was just, this is how bad Sherman was. A great guy, George Jefferson, and give him credit. I'm sitting there one night, and it's a very empty house at Caesars in Atlantic City. And his manager was this ex-wrestler, big Irish guy, big ruddy face, white hair. And he goes, what can I tell you? He's got a lot of money. He likes doing it. He never even looked at me.
Right.
He would read my mind, thinking, why is he doing this? He's got millions of dollars, but he wanted to be a live stage performer.
Wow.
Who's the worst you ever worked with?
Well, I worked with a guy. I don't remember his name, but it doesn't matter. But I was in, I think it was in Cleveland, yeah. So my opening act, and I always tell the owners of the clubs, try to get me a clean act.
Are you talking about comedian?
Yeah.
I'm talking about somebody famous.
Yeah, yeah. There's a comedian. So I worked with this guy, and I always tell the club owners, get me somebody clean if you can, please, because I work clean.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I always watch the first night, I watch the opening act to see if there's any similarities or what we're doing or whatever. So this guy goes up on stage, and he says, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. He starts right in with this routine on bowel movements. And
That's a good way to start.
okay, and like 10 minutes in, he's still on that subject. Squeezing and sounds and plop sounds and water sounds and different shapes of stools. And he just goes on and on about this. So there's a waitress standing next to me. I said, have you ever seen this guy before? And she goes, you mean Dr. Shit?
Dr. Shit.
Yeah, that's not his real name, but that's what
Right.
they've named him. I said, is this all he talks about? She goes, yeah. And he did 15 or 20 minutes on stool samples and sizes and shapes. So I spoke to him after the show and I said, listen, I don't like to tell people what to do, but before I go on, do you have anything else that you, besides the stool stuff? And he goes, yeah, I got some stuff. And he said, I'll do it tomorrow night. So I go and I watch him. And he works great. Great material, great
Really?
observations, unbelievable. So I said to him after that, that's really good. That's really great. Thank you. So I watched him the next night. And instead of 15 minutes of that stuff, he does about 12 minutes. Then he throws in 3 minutes of stool stuff. Then the next night, there's 9 minutes of stool stuff. And then by the end of the week,
He went right
15
back.
minutes, he can't stop.
Couldn't help himself.
He couldn't stop.
He couldn't stay out of the toilet.
He was such a anal whatever guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all he could think about. It was really...
Yeah, I asked Felicia Michael one time just not to do this really gross joke at the end, and she couldn't help it.
Right.
You know. That's funny, Dr. Shit. I remember the first time I worked with Robert Schimmel in New Jersey. I remember calling Lisa, Lisa, my ex-wife, and go, Lisa, you're not going to believe the opening line this guy had. He said, do you ever take a shit and look at it and remind you of somebody you know? That was his opening line. So you can imagine how dirty that was.
Right.
Well, I've been working cleaner lately. I think it's just run its course. You know what I do sometimes to a challenge is myself. So you work completely clean, which is different, but I'll do dirtier stuff in the beginning or middle, and then try and close 20 minutes of real clean stuff. Just as a challenge,
Yeah.
Make sure I'm just not getting cheap laughs off the dirty material.
Right.
I don't want to be limited. I remember talking to Jerry Seinfeld about it one time, and he had some regrets about working clean.
You're right.
Yeah, he
You
said
made too much money?
Yeah, he made too much. No, but he said, I feel like I painted myself into a corner, and I can't get out of it. And I said, well, that's what I expect from you now, because we were down at the Comedy Magic Club a couple of years ago. Gary Shandling, Jerry and I. Gary and I were and you know how sensitive and nuts he is. We're watching Jerry from the monitor in the back, and Jerry said something kind of blue, and they went, whoa.
Right.
And Gary goes, why did they do that? I said, because they're not used to that from him.
Right.
He said, you, on the other hand, are such a pig, they wouldn't be surprised. He goes,
That's right.
and Gary's so insecure. He goes, you really think I'm a pig?
Right.
I go, take it easy, will you? I'm just making a fucking point, They expect it from Jerry.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard he was going to do a show or something. He was working
I
on.
hope so, because he's brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah, one of the best. Mark Schiff, thank you so much for being on. I love you, man.
Thank you.
And thank you, like I told you before, for all the times you helped me when I started out.
Thank you. Same here, and I hope I see you again soon.
Do you have a Twitter account?
I do.
What is it? Tell them.
How about if I give him my...
I'm at Dom Irrera. I'll be at the Stress Factory in New Brunswick. Do you know that place?
I don't.
Oh, it's great. Benny Brand,
Yeah.
great club.
Yeah. But markschiff.com they can go to.
Okay.
Okay?
And any gigs coming up you want to plug?
Yeah, I did one the other day.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
It's a good plug.
The Polish plug. You should have seen me last week. Remember that show, a comic sitting at a bar, and a woman comes over, and she says, I really want to take you up to my room and make bad passionate love and just spend the whole night with you and do whatever you want. He goes, which show did you see?
Mark Schiff, is this thing on?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Tom.
Love you, brother. Thanks.
You too. Love you too. Thank you.
Mark Schiff, huh?
Huh?
Did I tell you?
I tell you, folks.
See you next time.